We're here with Gary Loomis today, obviously the founder of G Loomis, but more importantly now he's got a new line of rods, Edge, which he's in the country talking about, especially with AFRA and seeing around a couple of tackle stores. First of all, I wanted to cover how you got into fishing. What I guess were your sort of bread and butter species, I guess what you started on, cut your teeth on, and your passion for?
Well, my passion since I've been that big was been fishing. I mean, I fished all of the time, ride my bike 16 miles out of town and fish until 5 o'clock and get home by dark and get my rear beat because I was a little late or something like that. But I really got, into the seriousness of the big stuff was when I got out of the Navy. I was in the Navy from 1960 to 64. I got out, got married on the 16th of April, and about the 28th of May somebody said that there was summer steelhead in the Klamath River, which there's no summer steelhead. First plant, return of the plant. So I went down there fishing and I caught 8. And you don't catch 8 steelhead. I mean, in them days, 2 in the winter was a good day, and I catch 8. I mean, I was hooked. I'd never been on heroin, but I'm sure it's not as addictive as 8 summer steelhead in one day.
Now that was the very first run, were they? Very
first run of planted fish.
So
in that particular river, and nobody even knew it. The game department does stuff like that, so if it works, there they are. If it doesn't work, they don't look bad. See?
Yeah, exactly.
So nobody knew about it. Somebody just said that there was, and I said, "Now they're winter fish brightening up, going back to the ocean." He says, "I don't think so." Well, he was right. And so that's the 28th of May. So I fished the rest of May, all of June, all of July, all of August, until the 7th of September, and missed 3 nights of fishing. And I just got married on the 28th of April, or 16th of April, and still married, 50 years.
I think that's called game fishing, isn't it? Game fishing, isn't it?
I picked the right woman. And so, I guess how I really got into rod building is also right on that story. As in the very beginning, our snow was melting in the Cascades and the water was high and kind of murky. So we used winter steelhead gear.
Yep.
Well, these fish are totally different. See, they're coming in the spring and the summer, and the water's getting lower and clearer. Well, all of a sudden, I can see lots of fish, but I can't get them to bite.
Yeah.
So I dropped down and pound test. Well, they didn't have much respect for 12. They had no respect for 6. And so when you'd hook the fish, it'd just go end over end and snap you off. Yeah. I learned in those years that you take 10-pound test, wrap it around your hand, hold it out like that, you can't break it. But you can break it easy this way.
Yeah.
So how we break most of our fish off is a shock, not pull. So what I figured that I needed is a long shock absorber. So I went down and I bought a 7-weight fly rod. And being a machinist by trade, I just drilled the back of this out, extended the handle on it, turned around, cut off bottom 3 or 4 guides, put spinning guides on it. I went down with a 10.5-foot weapon, and I punished those fish. And so fishing every single night, you fish all of the water. Well, after about a month of doing this, or 2 months of doing this, you know where the fish lay and you know where they don't lay.
Yeah.
So I mean, I could go down the river and I just pick this fish up, because steelhead, when the water is the same level, which it usually is in the summer, you take one out of there, the next one coming up will lay in the exact same place. So all you had to do is hit those places. So one day I come down and there was a bunch of people fishing in the hole, and so I sit there talking to the one guy, and pretty soon the one guy stopped fishing, and I asked, says, "Okay if I take a couple casts?" He says, "Yeah, go ahead." So I just walked out there, and the first cast, there he is, and so I fought the fish. Well, I found it. When you hook the fish, you get the fish into just belly deep water, it takes that much longer to get him from belly deep water onto the bank. So I learned where I could just take that fish and pull that fish across and grab my boot and just flip that fish up onto the bank, snap him off in midair, get another one out, tie it on, walk back up, and there's the other one where the other one laid. And so I did the same thing. So I grabbed the 2 fish and started down the bank. And the guy says, hold it. Where are you going?" I said, well, I'm going home. He says, that's not, no, excuse me. He says, what are you doing? I said, I'm going home. He says, that's not what I meant. We take off an hour early to get down here. We beat this hole to death. You come down, make 2, 3, one time you made 4 casts, catch your 2 fish, and down the river you go. Now, what are you doing? Well, he was always very nice about letting me get my 2 fish and move on down to the next fish down. So I said, look at your rigging. Your rods are too short, they're too heavy, you got too heavy a line, too much lead, your bait's too big. That's about all. He said,
just rub it in a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the trouble, And he says, I never seen a rod like that. Where'd you get that? And I said, well, I made it. He said, make me one. I said, I don't make rods, I just fish. He said, no, I said, no, I don't. It's the only rod I ever made. I don't make rods. He said, well, sell it to me. I said, no. I don't sell my wife. I don't sell my kids. I don't sell my dog. I'm not selling you my fishing rod. No. Yeah, you're out of your mind, And he said, well, how much you got in it? And I think in them days I had about $35 in it. And in about 6 hours, you make rods, you know what it is, cutting them off, drilling them up, gluing them up.
Exactly, yeah.
And the only one I'd ever done before, So I told him, and he says, I'll give you $100 for it. And I said, no, I don't want to sell it. I don't want to sell it. And he says, I'll give you $150 for it. Well, now I was a journeyman machinist running a machine shop, and I made $97.20 take home a week.
So it kept going up and getting a little bit tempting.
And then he said, I'll give you $200. And I said, let me take my reel off of it. so I took the reel off of it. He gave me I never seen a $100 bill in them days. He gave me 2 of them. I don't know if I said thanks or anything. I was too stunned. I just walked out, got in my car, went down to the store, bought another rod, went home, took 5-minute epoxy, my wife's fingernail polish, and I was fishing the next day. So that was not one of the days I missed. So the next day I drive up where I always parked. There's a guy parked there standing next to his rig. And I parked next to him, I grabbed my stuff, and he said, hey, yeah? You the guy that's selling fishing rods? No, not me. Nope, not me. Nope, not me. He says, yeah. He says, the guy that sells fishing rods usually parks right here, I was told. And I said, it's not me. He says, do you know Al Hellenberg? I said, yeah, I know Al Hellenberg. He said, you're selling rods $200 a piece. I said, let me get my reel off of it. That is truly how I got into making rods. But I was a little smarter than the next guy. I went home, taught my wife how to do it. Then I was out on the river working my fingers off, selling the rods, and she was making them. So
selling, fishing, same thing, isn't it?
That's really how I got into it. And then a few years later, we started getting the whole blanks and guides right from the ground floor up and building them. But she was making more money than I was. I mean, no kidding. This guy built houses, and so I think what he was doing is every house he built, he'd give him a fishing rod,
Yep.
And he'd come into my wife. One time, it was another day I missed fishing. He'd come in and he said, "Do you have the 4 rods ready?" And she says, "Yeah." He says, "I need 5." Oh, she says, "I only have 4. What about that one?" Well, that's Gary's. Well, if it's good enough for Gary, good for me. So I come home, I don't even have a rod. She sold my rod. Couldn't believe it. So anyway, that's how I got into it. And I've been in it ever since.
Now, G. Loomis wasn't the first company you worked for fishing tackle wise,
no,
was it?
I started working, it was a little rod shop that I was getting my blanks and stuff at that time when I started building them from the ground floor up, and it was in Woodland. And it ended up being part of fiberglass. It was going, they ended up buying it, and that was their rod division when they got into it. And so I knew the accountant for fiberglass at that time, and I built a lot of equipment for that little rod company. And so 1973, he kept bugging me and bugging me and bugging me to go to work for him. And so I went to work for him in '73 and brought graphite into the industry in '74. And there was two of us. One of them was Don Green from Fenwick and myself. And I was there for 5 years, patented their ferrule and patented a tapered graphite arrow and a few things like that.
Yeah, because previously it's all fiberglass then, wasn't it? And
Yeah, it was all fiberglass. First year I worked there, it was total fiberglass. And that was really good because that gave me that time to learn how to build a blank and how to design a blank and this type of stuff. So then when I got into graphite, it was nothing known. I mean, when I went to the AFMA show and saw the first graphite rods that Fenwick had there, I picked them up and I got lightheaded. And I went to the owners of Lima Glass. I said, we got to get into graphite. They said, what's graphite? And I said, I don't know, but I know we got to get into it.
All right, so obviously you're out in Australia to promote your Edge series of rods. Obviously you started the brand Northfork Composites first before then getting into complete built rods. Can you tell us a little bit about Edge and Northfork?
Well, you know, G. Loomis, I was there. I ended up getting prostate cancer in '95 and took the cure. They gave me 18 months to live. And my accountant says, if you want anything for the wife and the family, you know, you better sell it while you're alive. So I sold it. I stayed with him for 12 more years. So it's kind of like I wasn't just selling it to get out.
Yeah, yeah.
And the little bit of a problem there is they put me in sales, and you know I'm really RD and marketing. I mean, you know, manufacturing.
Machines by trade.
Yeah,
so
that's
exactly.
right. You know, but anyway, you know, it was fine. I really built a restoration company, Fish First. Then, and we saved some streams around there and did in-stream restoration and stuff, and you know, went to shows and this type of stuff. But geez, I seen all these new materials and these new things come by, and I get my hand slapped, and so I just kind of stayed back until it was time for me to leave.
Yeah.
You know, so I left, and then I had a little bit of lawsuit problem with them because of my name. And I wasn't going to make fishing rods anymore anyway. I was going to start a company called Loomis Outdoors, which was going to be flies and lures and this type of stuff, because I owned a half of an interest in a fly company in Thailand. And so that kind of, you know, didn't work after the lawsuits and stuff like this. So my son, which had worked 10 years at at G. Loomis also, he had left, and he had some business in making composite parts for ATVs, A-arms, and this type of stuff, and musical instrument stiffeners for violins and for this type of stuff. So we did it. And so anyway, I had all the equipment, and because I bought out a couple of the fishing rod companies at that time. And so then as people that I made blanks for before, you know, come up and said, hey, the old blanks aren't the same as they was. We want the good ones.
The whisper started.
Yeah, and so I started making a few blanks, you know, and this type of stuff just for those people, more of a hobby than really going back into. It was one of those 7 days that I was in retirement. And then all of a sudden I get a guy call me up, his Pat, and he had just started a new magazine called Salmon Steelhead Journal. And it looks like a National Geographic. It's a beautiful, beautiful magazine. And he wanted to do some shootouts. Now, you know what shootouts are?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So he had 20 or 30 different companies send in rods. And I said, well, what's the rod for? He says, for catching spring chinook in the Columbia River with herring. I said, well, that's wonderful, Pat. Nobody's ever designed a rod for that. He said, well, that's why I want that, you know, a rod. So I got my real good pro staff back around me and started saying it, so we went through it. And it was something that really needed to be done, because you had about 20% of the strikes you had, the fish never came back. And it was because it was short rod, stiff rod, and when they hit it, it was like it scared them, so they just moved away. and you're hooking them, they're coming up right straight behind it, so when you're trying to hook them, you're just pulling it out of their mouth. So the hook to catch ratio wasn't very good. Well, instead of a 7 and 8.5, 9-foot rod, I had a 10.5-foot rod. It was more almost moderate to parabolic, and so that when they bit it, there was just no resistance.
You didn't feel it.
And they'd stay on it. And then when they finally did take it, and they would start to swim off, you'd hook them this way instead of this way. So the catch ratio went up to about 80-85%. And so anyway, they tested the rod and it came out first, and it was under North Fork Composites. And so right after that, he had me do 2 more of them, and I did 2 more of them, and I won both of those also. So I
starting to sound familiar, the story.
I hadn't forgot everything, you know. So I won 2 more of them, and then I started getting people calling me in saying, Gary, I want one of those rods that won the shootout on. So I said, no, I don't make rods. I make blanks. I can make you some blanks. I said, no, I need rods. I don't fish with blanks. I fish with rods. So here came Edge. So that's really about how I got back into it, just because of demand and this type of stuff.
Yeah. You touched, I guess, a little bit on the new materials, new composites and stuff, some new technologies.
Well,
have you incorporated any of those into the Edge series?
Oh yes. Yeah, you know what? When you know, I almost was able to start with a clean slate. You know, I made 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 patterns in my life and different materials and this type of stuff. And some of them were great, some of them were good, and some of them weren't so good. So you can kind of push those aside and get down to the great rods. And so in a lot of cases, I brought in a lot of the real good actions that was preferred and this type of stuff. You know, I'm a pretty good fisherman. I'm not the best in the world, but I'm good enough to fish with the best in the world and find out what they need as a tool to do their job better.
Exactly.
Well, in those last 12 years, you know, the fishermen have changed some of the way that they're fishing, and some of them changed their lures, their presentation, and all of these type of stuff. So I, in a lot of cases, took some of the cases I didn't change anything. They was fine. But in a lot of the cases, I'd have to change them just a little bit to get those things just to chatter or to fish just right, to get that, you know, skip that bait or whatever the thing is. And so I did that. And along with that is there was 12 years in there that there was really not much changes happening, because I was the material person. I mean, when I first got started, you know, nobody was building anything. Fenwick was building a few rods, but they had a big problem.
Yeah. Because
they didn't understand the modulus to the strain rate. The modulus means stiffness to weight is 6 times higher than glass. So in that particular case, you only need 1/6 the material to get the same stiffness. But the problem is graphite was only half the strength. So when I took 6 times less of the material, I got 12 times weaker.
Yeah.
So they had 100% breakage. And so what I did is, because I used some engineers from Boeing's and this type of stuff, we could make them 3 times lighter and the same strength. So this is where we just went like that at fiberglass back in the early 70s. And there, you know, I was right at the, always be lucky, not good. Lucky is really good. And being so early in the thing, all of these engineers, when I first got into it, there was only 4 composite engineers in the whole world.
Worldwide.
Now there's 50,000 of them, but at that time there was 4. I happened to take one to breakfast, lunch, dinner, breakfast, lunch, dinner, breakfast, lunch, dinner, until he finally agreed to work with me and help me. We got a structural designer engineer and a computer designer engineer, wrote the only large-scale deflection computer program system in the world to structurally design tapered tubular parts on a computer. So we would shoot like this, okay? So I worked with all of the engineers from Boeing's and Sandia and Alamos Law and all of these different places, because they was engineering. Nobody was building.
Yep.
And so I was in there, and that's where I learned all about composites and this type of stuff was from these people. I mean, I built Reagan Star Wars. I built hubs for tubes for the Hubble telescope. I built the tubes for Boeing 777. I built pole vault poles, javelins, arrows, golf shafts. I had all of Ping's and Tommy Armour's and Titleist and Wood Brothers iron shafts at one time, and baseball bats. And in this, I'm working with all these other engineers. You know, I'm really coming up. At that time, they weren't really building anything because, you know, if I build a rod that happens to break, I build them another one. If Boeing's is builds an airplane with a wing on it and it falls off, they're in big trouble. So I had 10 years of this working with all these engineers, and then when they finally started manufacturing, they didn't know what to do, so they came to me and said, how do I get this tube off this mandrel? And so it was a really good, lucky than good. Always better to be that. So anyway, saw these materials come by and this type of stuff, and so I reached out, and you know, I'm the kind of guy that picks my fiber, picks my resin, you know, and grams per square meter, percentage of resin, how it's laid up and everything else. And most of them are all different. You know, you got an SM, standard modulus, you got an IM, intermediate modulus, you got an HM, high modulus. Sometimes you blend them together, and sometimes you just run them straight out of the other materials. But the thing is, if you want to, let's say you came to me and you said, Gary, this is the best rod I've ever fished. Well, if it's the best rod you ever fished, what can I do as an engineer or designer or anything to build a better one? I make it lighter in weight. Weight is a deterrent to performance every time. So what you're telling me, it's the best rod you ever fished. It's the right length, it's the right action, and it's the right power. That's what you're telling me. So what I've got to do is, because that's perfect for you, I've got to make it lighter. So what do I have to do? I have to have a material that is higher in modulus, higher in strain rate, so I can reduce the amount of material, reducing the weight, keeping the same stiffness and the same strength. Then I can make a rod you say, wow. So what you've got to be is real, right your nose to the grindstone of what new fibers are coming out.
Where you were, and that's fine.
Weight is a deterrent to performance in a fishing rod. And it really works like a diving board, a pole vault pole, storage and recoverage of energy. How much do you recover on how much you store? So let's say a diving board, fishing rod, same way, storing it. You jump on the diving board, it loads, it recovers, it throws you so far, it oscillates so long it stops. Well, if I took that diving board and I put weight under it, like you would in a fishing rod, you didn't have quite the good design, you put more guides on it, you put finish on your blank, all this type of stuff, it'd be like taking and putting 50 pounds under the diving board. I haven't changed the stiffness, just stiffness to weight. So now when I jump on that diving board, that energy has to recover me and the 50 pounds. It doesn't throw me as far, but it oscillates a longer period of time, showing you it did not discharge a higher percentage of energy. So a lot of people don't realize it, but when you cast, that rod does this. The longer it vibrates, the line's going out of the tip, and so the line goes through the air like this, doesn't go as far, isn't as accurate, or anything. And then on your bites, the same thing. The more stuff that I put on that rod, it absorbs the sensitivity to feel the bite. And between you and I'd rather feel the bite than not feel the bite.
I think many people would.
That's what I'm out there fishing for. So anyway, weight is a deterrent to performance, and this is some of the other things that we look at.
And so you've also, I guess this is the first rod company that's ever released full carbon handles like yours. I know obviously Loomis had something similar quite a while ago, but these are quite different and they have a bare finish on them. They do feel really nice in hand. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. I really started the first graphite handle clear back at Lima Glass. In those days, In those days, I'm not too sure it was for sensitivity because I just never thought too much about it, because at that time we had a fight between EVA and Hypalon and all that rubber based,
Yeah.
which is really bad for sensitivity. Cork was much better than that was. So I was fighting that stuff, and I was probably the one that kept cork in the industry, or everything that went that way, which would have really killed. I mean, some of the imports are that way now, but they're just Texaco service station rods. They're not fishing rods, you know. So I put straight graphite on it mainly because it was really nice. We do a lot of fishing like salmon and steelhead and stuff with pole holders. And boy, to get that baby out of that pole holder, she just slides right out of that pole holder. And another thing I didn't like is we didn't know how to taper them. I don't have one of the tapered forecorks right here right now. But when you have a salmon rod and you have a straight deal and it's up in front, you always have it to slide back. So all your corks, if you ever notice, all your forecorks are tapered, smaller here and back here. So then that way there it doesn't slide back, it doesn't slide back into the reel. So I never really liked it. I always put graphite here and cork on the front. Well, then when we got in and we started these rods, I'm always on that edge of what can I do to make them better and better and better. And let's face it, graphite is a conductor of sensitivity, and cork is an insulator. They use cork between the ceramic and the capsule on your re-entry steels. They have cork in between it. Why? Because it's such a good insulator. It doesn't burn, and it's an insulator. So I'm thinking, why would I want an insulator? Why would I not want to feel the bite? So I started working with the handles. Well, the other handles that we used to do was woven material. We just rolled them up on a mandrel.
Yep.
So we had material this way and we had material this way. Well, the problem with that is if you get any of this, it twists real easy because there's nothing to stop it from twisting, and so you can't make it too thin. Yes, this keeps it from this keeps it from this, but it doesn't keep it from crushing, and it doesn't keep it on a twist in a rod holder when it went down like that. Well, I want the lightest, the strongest. So if you see how on this and here, how the fibers are running this way, so I've got it for hoop strength, and I've got it for longitudinal, and I got it for torque. Kind of learned that when I was making golf shafts. So that's about 30% thinner than you would do if it was a woven handle. And it really is sensitive. There was people I talked to at the show here that we haven't sold a whole lot of them here yet, but I mean already, that said, you know, the first time I was fishing with a jig, I jerked every time I hit the bottom. I thought it was a bite. Never felt my jig hit the bottom, you know,
That's
before.
right.
So it's that. So this is our what we call our Black Widow line of handles here, and then we came out with another line which is our first strike rods, and some people like it tapered, some people like it a little bit different texture in it, and so we made those, and they're just as strong, and they have kind of a spider mentality of a foam underneath it.
I was going to ask, is there a high density foam underneath? Is that how you're getting the ability to taper them?
Closed cell.
Right, yeah.
Closed cell, and it's the very best that we can find to be able to put under here. These here have carbon rings underneath them.
Okay, yeah.
They go right directly to the deal. Another thing that I really like is our offset handle. Do you see how the handle is offset?
And sitting down lower, yeah.
So that way the reel sits down lower. When you cradle the reel, it's not up so high where it twists. And then what I like about it is when you're reaching up to hit the spool, you don't have to reach up so high.
That's right, it's lower down.
Lower down.
Easier.
And anytime you have a full straight through deal, you fish like this. This is 15 degrees back, so you can take that back and you're not hyperextending your wrist every time that you're casting. Fish all day and you don't get near as tired. And then the weight of it is streamed down very light.
One of the other rods we haven't spoken about here, I believe this is new. This is a new series coming out later in the year, the Fly series. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, for obvious reasons, I tried to stay out of the fly market. But again, just like the Salmon Steelhead Journal Pat, they just keep bugging me and bugging me and bugging me, and there's a lot of rods for casting and spinning that you got to make and design and engineer, and the fly rods, I just tried to stay out of them, but they just kept bugging me, and so this is our really first shot at it. These are totally a different design than any of the rods that we make. Different graphite, different process, different patterns. 100% graphite. All of our HM are 100% graphite too. I've made some pretty good fly rods, and I think, and
well, I was about to say it's.
And I think
Loomis, yeah.
Right now, these people seem to be happier with these, and I think it's that next generation. It was just like when graphite came out, we had one graphite. I called it 96% graphite. Fenwick called it HMG, and there was only one graphite. AS4 fiber made by Hercules. That was it. So, and it was 8 years before they came out with another one. And that's because they really, I'd like to say they did, but they really didn't make this graphite for us. They made it for aerospace.
Yeah. And
so we had a lot to say about it in the early years because they didn't sell much of it to aerospace because they was engineering. And we was building.
That's right.
So we had a lot of say-so in them days, but like I said, they didn't build it for us. But there was a lot of things that we had to have for this new concept that we have for designing and building blanks, and very expensive, but it's that next generation. Like I said, every 8-10 years something new comes out, and this is the newest of the new. And like I said, everybody that has casted it has said, "What'd you do here?" So I think it's going to be a good seller.
Good to hear. I noticed you said there was a different graphite. Are you incorporating different fibers along the actual blank for the fly rods themselves to get different actions? I know we touched on it a little bit before, high modulus, standard modulus.
Yeah, I made some rods one time. It was called hybrids, and this has been a while back. And today at this show, believe it or not, I think it was on Monday. A guy come by, and when I seen him, I knew exactly who he was. "When are you going to get me the hybrid rods?" I have literally started them 3 or 4 times again, get the mandrels or get the material. I couldn't find the material, but it was a unidirectional material, unidirectional glass, okay? And then unidirectional graphite, and then a woven graphite. These were for the big stand-up rods for the big fish, GTs and tuna and these type of fish. And really like a car. You have rubber tires, you have glass windows, you have a cast iron block. Well, in some cases, you want to use the right material in the right area. So you take one of these big rods, and what you really want is you want a lot of bend in the tip. So you really need a material that has a long elongation. But what you want is that elongation, but you want it to be progressive. Well, it's very hard to get progressive from going from glass to graphite woven. But if you design it correctly, this here will bend over so that it'll do the jig, and you can cast with it and this type of stuff. But your highest recovery rate is unidirectional glass. So what you do is you have a pattern that's like this that gives you enough glass in the front to get the stiffness that you need, which makes it really, really tough. And then you come into your unidirectional graphite, which your woven glass underneath creates the hoop strength. So then you've got just unidirectional. It's the highest recovery rate of any material. Then when you come down into the butt, where a lot of those will have a 3/16 to a 1/4 inch diameter of the butt because they want no bending in the butt. When they lift that up, if there's, think about it, you got 30 degrees up there, you may lose 8-10 inches. You get 1% bend here because of the leverage area, you get another 10 or 13 inches. So they don't want no here. So what we did is we run the unidirectional back here, then we put the woven in, and what that did is so if they got it on the edge, it wouldn't crush, and yet people looked at the back of it and says, never stand up. But it did stand up, and we did very, very well with them. So putting the right material in the right place in a lot of cases is the thing to do. And they're in these rods, not these particular rods. These particular rods are either IM or HM. But in a lot of our particular rods, we'll put some SM in it for some certain thing, and then some IM in it, or some of them will put some HM in it, you know, if we were trying to get some dampening or some lightness out on the tip. And this one here is totally a different cat in its own, and it has 45-degree unidirectional graphite in it, and right now we're just kind of keeping a little bit to ourselves.
Right, fair enough. Obviously we're talking about some of the newer products. Have you got anything in the horizon that's yet to be released, coming out?
You know, everybody has asked me from the very beginning, when I really came out with graphite rods that didn't break and this type of stuff, what's the next thing? I don't know. You know, it's not like if there was something there today, I'd have it here. So it's just that, you know, all of a sudden people are working with a lot of different resin systems. You know, you've heard of all of these
guess nano resins,
nanotechnology and this type of stuff, and the only really nanotechnology that ever worked was back in the old, started really with our HM, IMX and GLX. Epoxy resin is fairly brittle. So they started that nanotechnology back there, and they added some we're going to call it rubber, because they won't tell me exactly what it is, but I know what it is. But anyway, so I'm not supposed to tell anybody. But anyway, which made it tougher, but as strong. At one time, when they used to first start using graphite in aerospace, they would take a aluminum sheet, and then they would glue on with a graphite panel, which made it about 1/2 the weight. But what happened if you didn't have the graphite, if you didn't have the aluminum panel, you shoot a bullet hole in it, and because of everything else, it would just wiggle until it split. The aluminum panel behind it let it stop splitting, but the graphite panel being so stiff kept it from moving in this time. So what they needed was a toughened resin system that wouldn't split. Well, by the time that they started working on it, they also figured out how to make it a toughened high impact resin system. And in our IMX we had a toughened resin system, and now we have a toughened high impact resin system, which doesn't make them as brittle as they used to be, makes them tougher. Because in these, you've got, it's like taking a piece of paper and taking a pencil and rolling it up. So you got layer, 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 layer. Well, when you bend a tube, you put tension on the top, compression on the bottom. So this here wants to grow further, and this wants to compress. So you have a lot of inner shear in there. So if your laminates aren't really good in there, that's what fails first. In the design criteria, you know, you've got a diameter to wall thickness to bending load. Well, that's pretty good if you're making a straight tube. You can figure it out easy. But when you're making a tapered tube and you've got to vary it from the tip to the butt, it's a little bit harder of an equation.
A little bit complex.
A little bit harder to do.
So obviously these rods were the latest ones to release. Have you got anything on the horizon for Edge?
Yeah, we have quite a few different ones, but at the show, the ICAST show, we just brought out our new tuna sticks.
Okay.
And we'll probably end up with about 8 of them, but I think we've got 3 of them pretty well zeroed in. And the people really, really did like them. And our tuna classics are just a couple weeks from now, so I have to go out and really test them for fishing. But I think everybody that pulled on them really liked them. But you know, we're always working on that next project or whatever, you know, and we do a lot more than just fishing rods.
Yeah.
We do a lot of industrial tube for aerospace and for satellites and
that's with North Fork Composites, not Edge themselves. Edge
that's
is
right.
the fishing.
Yeah, our real company is North Fork Composites, and then we have different companies within it, like Edge and Vapor Shaft, and we have another ore company. We make graphite and ores for drift boats, and we've just made a new one. The graphite ores that we made were really light. I mean, I've got people that say that if I had to go back to, you know, the old fiberglass or the wood ore or this type of stuff, aluminum ore, I'd just quit fishing. Says it's got almost like a little electric motor on there. He says they just move it when you move the boat. But we just designed another one, and it's in a prototype, and the guy's testing it now, and it flexes about like wood, so that it's still light, still as light as graphite, but it has just a little bit of a flex in it, so that the guy feels more like he does wood. So I don't know. I think he's going to lose a little bit, but he's going to feel, I guess, maybe not the impact when he pulls, the hard impact, but the younger guys, they don't worry about the impact. They worry about moving the boat.
That's right.
But us old guys, we need to cut down the impact. So we design a lot of different things. We're making an antenna right now for Boeing's, which is going to end up being for the Navy. But in the old days, when you watch those old war movies, and the guy was way out past, and he was going from channel to channel to channel to try to get through. Well, that's called a gaggy antenna, and it's got different wavelengths on that antenna. And I think the gaggy antenna weighs 256 pounds. And we're making one now that'll going to be at about 54-pound range. The gaggy antenna, today you got to go into the yards to fix it. This will be in a tube about this big around, and they'll be able to put it up in an hour. So if anything happens, they still won't lose their reception. They'll be able to put it up, and it's going to have, and it's this vapor shaft. We're kind of hooked in with this with conductive composites, and they've learned how to be able to nickel coat graphite.
Oh, sure.
And there's a lot of things on this nickel coating the graphite. For instance, our next warplane is going to be unmanned, because it'll move so fast and this type of stuff that you can't have man in it. And instead of shooting bullets, it'll be shooting lasers. And these lasers, what they're worried about is the fly-by-wires and the computer. So we're going to have to protect those, and this nickel graphite will protect them. So we'll make tubes that they'll run the fly-by-wires in that. So we're making some conduit. They're doing some testing of that right now. So we're into a lot of different
things.
Yeah, it's exciting and it's fun and again, you get with a lot more different people, different engineers, and you know how that is. If you're a civil engineer, you get with this guy and you learn a little here, you learn a little here. Pretty soon you can put something together you couldn't put together before.
That's right. That's right.
And it's really fun. So we've got a lot of things on the horizon that we're working on, but we just until you get them together, until they're right, you know, we're going to let them out when they're right and they're as good as we can make. But But if new technology comes along, we're going to be right on it too. I mean, we just, like I said, I had to stand around for 12 years and not mess with it. Now you're going to do it again.
No, not at all. Well, you've been at the forefront, I guess, of graphite technology for a while. The only thing really left on a rod that isn't made out of graphite these days are the guides. They are starting to come up. Do you think that's going to be a viable option in the future, or do you think the complexity of graphite itself is?
Well, you can't say no about anything today. I mean, our telephones. Would you ever believe that 10 years ago?
No.
Or 5 years ago of what it'll do today that it would. So I'm not saying no. It's just it's probably going to be one of the tougher things. You do have to have something hard and slick in the ring. And to be able to make the frame out of it, it's tough enough to be able to make the frame out of it. I mean, I made some of the very first ones, geez, clear back in the 80s, that was injected, molded the frame, and then you glued in a ring. But in them days, there was nothing, no material, even, what did we use? I can't remember what we used right now. But there was no material that was hard enough to transmit the sensitivity through it to the rod. It's got to transfer through the guide into the blank and, into your hands. It doesn't, if it's just suspended out there touching nothing, you don't get it. But that was the main reason. They was nice, and it was kind of like the flex guides, they flexed and all of this type of stuff, but it just didn't have that transmitting down to the blank, and so we just went off to do something else. But like I said, with these new materials, if they can get something hard enough and tough enough to transmit that. Another one, we should kind of talk about as long as we're here is spiral guides.
Yeah, now they're big obviously in the US, but it's not really something that's caught on too much here. Obviously, it's quite different to a lot of people. It is quite different. And when it sets in the store, the first thing they say is guides are on crooked. Yeah, exactly. and they don't give it. But let me tell you, the only reason on a casting rod to have the guides on top is because we've been doing it that way for 150 years. But how long did our parents ride in a horse and buggy? Long time. I don't want to go home in a horse and buggy. Not at all. And I don't want to go home on a ship, fly home. And that's the same thing here. If you hold on to this. First of all, when you pull up on it, pull up. Don't be afraid of it. When you pull up on it, you see that the line never touches the blank. Okay? That's number one. Yeah. Number two is, if the guides are, if this is on top, when the fish is moving from side to side like this, it has to pop over and pop back over. It's just wrong. On the bottom, it just follows the fish. That's right. You got your, I guess, point of gravity, center of gravity on top. Yeah. It's always wanting to twist. Always wants to twist it. Put underneath. And then so this way here, go back and forth this way. Another thing is we're using a lot more of the braided line. It's more supple and gets around your tip more. Well, on this, it just falls off. Turn it over. That's right. You turn it over and it hangs up on it. So that's another one. Number two is, or three or four, is I don't have to put as many guides on it. So you pull up on it like you got a fish on. Okay, now I'd have to have probably 3 more extra guides. Remember what I said about guides? Yeah. The more guides you got, the more weight you got, the less performance you got in the rod. So I got to tell you, if that can go around that little spool, it can sure make a 180-degree turn in 3 feet. That's right. And the line hangs away from the blank, so there's no friction on the blank. When it's on top, you got friction on the blank because it wants to drop because of the deal. So when you cast it, you got that friction as it's moving through the guides on the blank. This way it's on the bottom, doesn't have that friction. Again, it also helps with lines as well. Get more life out of them, but that's right. So I really think that people ought to pay a lot more attention to it because it's been out for a long time.
and we've tried it a couple times, but now of the internet, and we talked about internet, and how these people can get online and they can learn so much quicker. I had I think I told you I had a little boy in Portland come up. He was 14 years old. He came up with his grandpa. He just grabbed one of the rods off the deal and says, Grandpa, this is the rod I've been telling you about. And he talked about the materials. He talked about the handle. He talked about the spiral guides. I sat there and I looked at him. I thought, where did he learn that? I said, where'd you learn that? He said, off your website. So let me tell you, these websites and this type of stuff, this younger generation, this is what's happening.
Exactly.
Grandpa just sat there and goes, yeah. I don't know. If I'd have told him, probably wouldn't have listened, but seeing grandson was telling him, he listened to every bit of it.
That's right. It's just, wealth of information, isn't it? There really isn't a downside to the spiral guides. I mean, apart from look, that's the only thing. And I think it's quite a deterrent for some people, but they need to get over that fact.
Yeah. Well,
casting's not affected. It's better fishing wise. Belongs to the life of your line.
And even the people that, some of the people that I just never do it. They only have to make 8 or 10 casts and they go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very noticeable, the difference between the two. Another good thing and a fun thing, especially at my age, I still am very enthusiastic and love to do it and this type of thing. But you got to be enthused.
Yeah.
And I just happen to have the greatest group of young people around me right now that's on my team. That if I ever do not get really enthused, they get me enthused really quickly, and it's really great to work with younger people that are enthused and exciting and smart.
Yeah, it is good, isn't it?
Oh, it's wonderful. And the thing is I learned a long time ago, don't surround you with people that are dumber than you are. So I got a smart group of young people around me. So
they must be all passionate as well, though. Yeah.
It is. It's great because they get that gold gleam in their eye and that excited look, and they're always going to the next thing and pushing me. Gary, we need this. Okay. But so it's fun. Keeps me young too.
Oh, that's good. Well, Gary, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
This interview was great. I learned a lot from it, and it's very good to sit down. And I guess for people wondering, keep an eye out for the edge rods and also some gear and apparel coming out later in the future. So, Gary,
thank you very much.